Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Erin Bird. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of the Circular Economy Club of Calgary. Thank you all for joining our first session of the week this afternoon, which is an introductory session on Circular Economy 101. The virtual sessions we're hosting this week are in celebration of World Circular Cities Week. All over the world, events are taking place on various topics hosted by circular economy clubs like ours. To find out more about the Circular Economy Club and its various chapters, you can go to circulareconomyclub.com. I'd like to start the session with a brief land acknowledgement. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Yaqsi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledged all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. Thank you. Some quick Zoom housekeeping rules before we get started. We do ask that attendees join with their camera off and their mic muted. You can interact with us by posting questions in the chat or comment section, and we ask that your comments and questions stay respectful and professional. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm a civil engineer and I currently work for the City of Calgary in the corporate project management role. I've worked in construction for over 20 years. I'm also volunteer with Engineers Without Borders Calgary Professional Chapter, and I lead the Fair Trade Calgary group. And I'm involved with other circular nonprofit groups such as Fashion Revolution YYC and now the Circular Economy Club of Calgary. My co-organizers for the events have included Adrita Hack, who works as an engineer in training for an energy company, Eileen Ling, co-founder of Makeshift Commons, Lori Farley, founder of Internobis, and they're bringing Impact Hub to Calgary, and Kai Constantini, founder of the Circular Economy Club Calgary chapter. I'll just start my presentation and then I will introduce over to our other guest speaker who is here today, Lindsay Seidel-Wassenaar. So thank you so much. We're talking today about Calgary's transition to a circular city, and we wanted to give people an overview of what circular economy means. The Circular Economy Club launched Circular Cities Week, and it's an annual global event where where local chapters or organizers will run workshops to push for the design and implementation of circular economy strategies in over 80 cities worldwide. I am back and sorry about the technical glitches. Okay. Zoom likes to just kick me out once in a while, so we'll keep going on that. Next slide, please. So just a brief agenda. I did talk already about Circular Cities Week. I'll talk a little bit about circular economy, and then we'll have our guest speaker talk a little bit about the Circular Cities project that she was doing. Next slide. So Circular Economy Club is the largest international network in the circular economy field. And we have over 6,000 professionals and organizations in more than 140 countries. It's a nonprofit global organization, very grassroots. And so you'll note that there is all these different chapters in different cities, and it is very loosely structured. So it allows for a lot of creativity, but sometimes it's good that we have the Circular Economy Club head office that sort of runs and helps moderate and point us in the right direction on things that we should be working towards. Next slide. So the Circular Economy Club of Calgary was recently formed. I think I mentioned Kai Constantini created the group a couple of years ago. It's a volunteer group of individuals that want to promote circularity in different industries in Calgary. We just created our Facebook page recently. We have a LinkedIn group as well. If you want to become part of the network and attend more of these types of sessions, please connect with us. We'd love to have you as part of our community of practice. And we really just want to try and push circular economy in as many different industries in Calgary as we can. So we do, depend on the expertise that's out there in our community to try and work on several different topics around circularity. And we also depend a lot on research and development that's happening in our city. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about circular economy, and I wanted to start with a poll to just hear how familiar people are with circular economy or the concept of circular economy. So if you wouldn't mind filling out the poll on just how familiar you are with circular economy, we just want to get a feel for, if you're a total newbie, if you have a little bit of knowledge, maybe you're considered an expert, and sorry for the little typo there, or other. If you're not really sure where you fit, then you can always pick other as well. Oh, well, that's good. We have some people with some knowledge on it, a couple newbies. So across the board, we have a good variation in the level of recognition on this term. So that's good. That will make my job a little bit easier in talking about this concept. Next slide. So these are a couple of quotes that were resonating with me when I was thinking about how do I introduce circular economy. And the first one is just talking about how we tend to overcomplicate things when we think it needs to have a million different steps. So, it's pretty amazing that instead of just washing a spoon, we think about getting a new spoon that has to be, using all these natural materials and turned into a plastic utensil that we then end up throwing away. So it's just a symptom of the way our culture currently is. And I guess that's also why this other quote about waste isn't waste until we waste it means a lot to me too, because circular economy is really about taking the word waste out of our vocabulary and, finding ways to reuse every portion of a product that we need to use or that we need to utilize. Next slide. So this is on the very basic premise, is just giving you a bit of the very straightforward explanation of how we're going from a linear economy, hopefully, to a circular economy. So linear economy is a very traditional concept where we take raw materials, we make something out of it, we use that product, and then we throw it away. And that's very, very straightforward, but very linear way of thinking about things. And part of the problem is that when we use a linear economy, we tend to run out of raw materials. We tend to spend a lot of effort in the production and the use of products. And then when we have non-recyclable waste, obviously it's contributing to our waste problem. So then, as we've learned a little bit more about the problems with the linear economy, we've started to go into what we're calling a reuse economy, where there's a bit of recycling that happens after we use a product, and hopefully it goes back into a production stage, but there's still a lot of non-recyclable waste. So the idea would be that we transition more to a circular economy where we think about how the raw materials are going to be using from the start, how we're going to be able to produce them in such a way and use the product, and then find a way to reinvent or reincarnate that product into a new product after we're done with using it. So it does require a very deep shift in the way we think of things, that we're not actually creating waste through what we're producing and what we're using, but we're actually making sure that it's a sustainable way of reinventing what we do so that we can keep using the same materials over and over again and contribute to less waste. Next slide. So some examples of this very basic concept would be, if you're thinking about a knit sweater. So how can we create the sweater knowing that we want to unravel it at the end of its life and maybe knit something new, maybe knit a pair of slippers or knit a scarf out of that? So things to consider. Well, this sweater has all different types of colors on it. So do we want our scarf or our slippers or our new product to have that many colors, or are we looking for just a blue knit scarf? So in that way, we have to think about how are those different colors going to be separated. Similarly, if you look at, say, an electronics component. So this is actually a piece from, it's called Fairphone. It's a phone that's made in the UK that has replaceable and interchangeable parts. So taking a look at this piece, what would happen if this electronics piece broke or needed something to be fixed? How would we create a fixable part, or how would we extend the life, or how would we, say, pull out the raw metal material and melt it down and create something new, maybe a piece of jewelry or maybe another piece for another type of electronics. So thinking in that regard, it brings across the idea, the basic idea of what circular economy is supposed to encourage. Next slide. And then, you go from that very basic, how do you make that one component or that one major component of a product circular, into how do you make every single little aspect of that product more circular? So thinking about, even the energy that goes into making that product, the human labor that goes into making that product. The if you're knitting a sweater and you have a machine that requires maintenance on it, how do you make that machine circular? How do you make if it's something that's man-made, how do you make that every component of it circular? So it takes it to a next level. And as you can see, there's two different loops here. So the one loop is more on like renewable energy and more natural aspects. So biosphere and restoration and biogas and all those things that relate to natural products. And then you look on the other side and it's more of the mining, material manufacturing, how we're making products and manufacturing products from what we can glean from the earth. So, and also there's financial circularity that you have to think about as well. So how do you make sure that there is that money that's being spent responsibly in a circular way that will continue to create economic outputs as it goes into its new products. So there's so many different aspects where you take a very basic concept of circularity and you turn it into a more complex situation. But if you break it down into its many little components, you will find circularity in every aspect of it. Next slide. So other ideas around, sustainable, renewable energy. So wind energy, we think about wind energy as being very sustainable, but do we think about the effort that it takes to create the wind turbines that are shown here? What are those made out of? How long are they going to last? How are we going to reinvent those turbines after we're done with it? Or can we create that wind energy forever? Or do we have to think about what that end of life and reinvention looks like? So, it's good to think of, energy or products on the very surface of what they mean and what they provide to us, but then to go a step deeper and really think about how every component that contributes to this is made circular is another step that goes even deeper. Next slide. And then to take even aspects of our nature and think about, well, we have a lot of natural organisms that just have, certain key features of them. This example of a fly who's able to be upside down because it has the right adhesives on its feet, or it has, certain components in the way that it's built that allows it to be regenerative or be able to have special features of it. Some other examples that I wanted to bring up around taking biomimicry into the circular understanding would be, for instance, climbing pads capable of supporting human weight are a mimic of biomechanics of gecko feet. Or the aerodynamics of the famous Japanese bullet train was inspired by the shape of a bird's beak. Or the first flying machine, heavier than air, from the Wright brothers was inspired by flying pigeons. So you can see how nature has a way of innovating and creating that we need to study and understand, because these ways that nature just automatically innovates and creates things are things that we can replicate. And other examples that have been used: shark skin for a swimsuit, or beaver tail for like a wetsuit, or beaver skin for a wetsuit, a burr for Velcro. These are just some of the other examples of how we can replicate nature, and then thinking about how nature replenishes itself. And yes, I really apologize. My computer just seems to like booting me out of Zoom. So economic opportunity, and I touched on this very briefly, but taking a look at all of the different stages in how we create products, there are certain examples of how different businesses have actually used circularity in their products to try to create economic benefit. So for instance, Nike has incorporated recycled materials into footwear and apparel. So 71% of all Nike footwear and apparel incorporates recycled materials. Nike Grind is a premium material palette born from a regeneration process of original materials and products. So they've been able to turn limited resources into limitless potential. Another company or brand, Philips, they're shifting their ownership model to offer lighting as a service. So Philips has committed to carbon neutrality for its global operation by 2020. To reduce to zero, they're going to drive down carbon emissions in operations, logistics, and business travel by becoming more energy efficient. They're going to purchase their energy from renewable sources and compensate remaining emissions via carbon credits. And they're going to recycle 90% of raw operational waste and aim to send zero waste to the landfill. Last one being Unilever. So Unilever is treating waste packaging as the new valuable resource. 25% of RPET by 2020 in water plastic bottles is what they're aiming for. So these are just some examples of how brands are using circularity as an asset as they develop their products or look at reinventing their existing products. Next slide. So every end is a new beginning on circularity, and that's how we need to think of it. We need to think of our products as how we can reincarnate them. There's one life for one product, but then how do we reincarnate it into the next generation of a product? How do we use each component and make it into a new product or as a part of a new product? There's lots of potential for niche markets and niche jobs, but to date, I think, at least in North America, there's not a lot of people taking advantage of this, and I'm not sure what's holding us back. It could be that we need more research, we need more development, maybe we need to get away from that consumer culture. There's definitely a shift in the way we're thinking of things, and the fact that we're having this talk today and talking about circular economy is definitely a great start. The Circular Economy Club also did an exercise earlier this summer, and all of the different clubs across the world did a brainstorming. It was called A Round Table, and it was around what do the post-COVID job opportunities look like in the circular economy realm. Some things that here in Calgary we brainstormed, and we were talking about, there's opportunities in clothing, textile, fashion, on becoming more circular in that regard. For electronics and repair, like how can we think about having repair stations for electronics? How can we think of having more interchangeable electronics, so that every time one little piece on your stereo or your iPhone breaks down, you don't have to throw out the whole product? Maybe there's a way to use 3D printing to print replaceable components of electronics. So there's so many different directions that this could be taken in. And it was really motivating to have that brainstorm, because it's not just one industry, it's so many different industries. That's also why on Friday we're going to be talking about the circularity of construction materials. So, how do we think about construction materials at the start of design, and think about how we want to reinvent those end uses after their life is, or after their use is done. So I encourage you to attend the Friday session as well. Next slide. So the vision really is to have a new era where all cities worldwide function through a circular metric. And, we have the end of waste. We don't use the word waste. It's a bad word. Take it out of your vocabulary completely. We want to bring the Circular Economy Club wants to bring the circular economy to cities worldwide by creating strong local movements. So that's what we're doing here in Calgary. You can be part of that solution. We need your brain power. We need all the different thoughts and ideas that are happening with people from different aspects of life or different roots of life. You all have your different lens that you bring to what we're doing in our current culture. So we need your brain power to help make change. Next slide. The Circular Cities Week we mentioned happens every year. And what's going to happen next is I'm going to pass it on. Next slide. This is just an example of the Circular City Canvas that was used by the Circular Economy Club, where they were, brainstorming different sectors and circular solutions and who to influence on circular ideas. So, this is just the start of a conversation. I feel like Calgary is a bit in its infancy around this concept. I know that I continue to learn every day a bit more about this. I'm definitely not an expert by any means, but yeah, I hope that you've learned a little bit more just as an introduction of what circular economy means. And I think you're going to learn a lot more when we hear from our guest speaker who will be coming up next. So I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks so much, Erin, and thanks to the Circular Economy Club for having the Recycling Council of Alberta participate in today's webinar. We're pretty excited to tell you about our Circular Cities project. But so my name is Lindsay Seidel-Wassenaar, and I am a project lead with the Recycling Council of Alberta, and specifically with the Circular Cities project. Firstly, just a little bit about the RCA. Some of you may not be familiar with our organization, but we are a not-for-profit that works collaboratively with our members and as well as our partners. So our vision, our overall vision is a waste-free world, and our mission is to promote, facilitate, and advocate for the circular economy in our province. So we are a provincial-wide organization. I just wanted to start my section off here with a little quote kind of from Bill McDonough, very much about, obviously, the circular economy addresses the economic elements as well as looks at reducing waste, but the circular economy very much promotes prosperity. So in North America, I would say we have this very much a tendency to focus on individual ownership of things. But the circular economy, when we're looking at sharing, collaborating, more of a community concept, that is what's going to create that shared prosperity. And so Bill McDonough is a world-renowned architect and really advocates for the circular economy. And if you haven't seen any of his work or read some of his books, highly recommend it. But he's a strong advocate for circular economy. So our Circular Cities project, or as we're kind of tending to call it now, communities, is a project where we worked with 5 different municipalities in the province. And we're tending to call it more communities because we had a nice range of municipalities and sizes. Some weren't actually cities. As you can see on the slide, we had the town of Banff participate. We had the City of Calgary, which we'll talk more about today because this is a Calgary chapter presentation. We had the Strathcona County, the City of Lethbridge, as well as the City of Edmonton. And I just want to highlight that this project was only made possible because of 2 major grants that we received. One was from Alberta Eco Trust, which is a super supportive organization in Alberta that highly encourage you to also check out. They have lots of sustainable projects and assist a lot of initiatives in the province. And we also received a grant from our provincial government under the Community Environment Action Grant. So firstly, what is a circular city? Although there is no universally accepted definition, we can look to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for some guidance. As you could see earlier, Erin had some graphics from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They are the experts when it comes to circular economy. So considering a circular city, what we really look for is the elimination of the concept of waste. And Erin talked a bit about that. We don't want there to be any waste. That's a bad word, as she said. And we're keeping our assets at their highest use. And all of this is enabled through digital technology. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just this day and age with the technology that we have, we are much more connected. We're able to utilize that in order to actually collaborate on a much higher level. And the big thing too, I want to mention here, especially in these COVID times, is circular economy, and especially at the municipal level, really increases our resiliency. So circular cities generate prosperity, increase livability, all just about the resiliency factor. And I think all of us would agree that we could use a little bit more of that through some of these times that we've had. So why are we looking at kind of implementing circular economy at the municipal level? So when we think of all the cities around the world, there's actually over like half of us live in urban areas around the world. 2/3 of our energy use is used in cities, and 70% of global resources are also used in cities. Considering a little bit more local here, 4 out of 5 of us Albertans actually live in cities already, and that's only going to continue to grow. So the big thing about cities is they are much more nimble. When we look at kind of creating change, the municipal level of government is going to be much more nimble, flexible, and have a greater ability to foster that change, especially when we compare it to our provincial government. And then we don't even want to begin when we look at the, the federal government for trying to create much needed change quite quickly. So in our cities, there's a close, the proximity of people and materials are much more dense. So we have access to a lot more resources or options, things like you think of like car sharing. There's just a lot more cars available, more people, or closer together. So sufficient scale for effective markets. I had mentioned already the ability of city governments to shape that urban planning and policy. So really be able to impact and create policy change where it's really needed. And I would argue that a potential barrier for circular economy right now is some of that policy. Enabling the policy change isn't always there. So kind of bringing in that needed legislation or the bylaws, that type of thing. So the city level is going to be the most efficient for that in our current government system. And then of course that digital revolution, we are a lot more connected now. We have access to technology and different resources so that we can communicate that way. So what are some of the components of a circular city when we think of that perfect city and bringing circular economy to Calgary? What does that look like exactly? So considering the different components, so housing and infrastructure, and I won't talk too much about this because there's going to be an exciting webinar on Friday about the built environment and construction and demolition. But really, when we're considering building design and construction, we want to consider modularity, as well as actually constructing things, considering disassembly in the future. So we've built this building, but what's going to happen to it at the end of its life? Can we take it apart and then use some of those pieces to potentially build a new building, or even just kind of interchange some of those pieces so that we can change its use without just having to bulldoze the whole building down and deposit that all into landfill? That's just silly from a design perspective. When we consider mobility, we're moving away from personal vehicle use. So we're going to look at more of a sharing platform type thing. A lot of us own cars, but the majority of our cars are parked for most of the day. In reality, when we think about it, we might drive to work and then the car's parked for the whole day, and then we drive home and then it's parked for the whole night. So getting away from that personal ownership piece, and of course any type of vehicles are powered by cleaner sources if possible. Looking at the food systems, we want to try to grow as much locally as possible, of course, to avoid transportation associated with that, as well as the community aspect in terms of like community gardens, things like that. So try and have that more local, and of course, eliminating food waste where possible. So that's things like even the green cart program that the city has, or also even donating excess food. So edible food can be eaten by humans. Any inedible food then can be maybe perhaps fed to animals. So eliminating food waste altogether. Then when we look at energy, of course, we want to have the cleanest energy possible. There are some pictures of windmills before, so examples like that. In terms of water, it's very much cycled through the city and reused wherever possible. Products, so consumer goods, are kept at the highest use possible. And when we look at things, materials specifically like plastic, we want to avoid single-use items. Well, I guess just avoiding single-use items in the first place, because, and I think Erin alluded to that at the beginning of her presentation too, this concept of making something, putting all this energy into this product, like a plastic spoon, using that spoon for a couple minutes and then tossing it. There's a lot of wasted energy there, and we should be designing things so that they can stay at their highest use as possible, and have a much longer life. And then, of course, when we're looking at industry, industrial symbiosis, so any byproduct from one industry can then hopefully be used actually by another. So again, no waste, or one industry's waste is actually another's feedstock. So for circular cities, we have some leaders that we looked to and did quite a bit of research through our project. Most of those leaders are in Europe. So we have places like Amsterdam, which is very much focused on the sharing economy. They have done quite a few, like encouraged entrepreneurs to focus on sharing business models. So things like car sharing, or even clothing, textiles, that type of thing. There's tons of examples out there, but Amsterdam has really kind of put most of their circular economy focus into sharing platforms within the city. Glasgow actually has their city council is working with their Chamber of Commerce, and that's to foster circular economy business innovation. So they're really trying to target businesses within the city and transition some of their business models to be more circular. Then we have London in England. They actually developed a circular economy roadmap, which focused on 5 main pillars. They focused on the concepts of food, built environment, textiles, because they are a big fashion capital of the world. So textiles made sense for them to kind of try to avoid that fast fashion push. They have a focus on electrical, and then plastic initiatives, because again, a lot of single-use items are coming from that plastic focus there. Peterborough actually has the goal of becoming a circular city by 2050, which is pretty cool. We did work with them a little bit at the beginning of this project as well to help develop some of our roadmaps. And yes, we're keeping tabs on how they're doing with reaching their goal. Brussels has a regional collaboration strategy to increase job opportunities and boost entrepreneurship. So again, really focusing on the business aspect of that, and that circular economy can really boost the economics of a city. Austin, a little bit closer to home, sharing platforms again they actually have a large citywide marketplace. It's kind of like a Kijiji, but it's more focused with businesses, and kind of going back to that industrial symbiosis part, any type of waste or like offcuts, things like that from industry or a business can hopefully then be put on this marketplace and given away or sold for very, very cheap to a different industry or business that needs that type of product. So really trying to link those systems there through a shared marketplace. And then Toronto, They are definitely leading the way on procurement research. So at the city level, they're really focusing on trying to make their internal procurement policies a lot more focused on circular economy. So we're also in discussions with them about, yeah, just to see kind of what research comes out of that. And procurement obviously makes sense for a lot of cities to focus on internally. So that will be some good outcomes there too, I imagine. So for our Circular Cities or Communities project, we kickstarted things off in the fall of last year, and then we had our community selection. We then did in-person workshops with all of our participating communities, and thankfully, we managed to get all of those workshops completed before the COVID hit. So we did actually manage to have all of those in person, and we had some great facilitators that really focused on kind of getting those ideas out of the municipalities of really what's currently circular in the city and what's some low-hanging fruit for them to really target for certain initiatives where they can make that transition to become more circular a little bit easier. And then what are some things that they should consider for the future, more kind of higher level goals in terms of becoming more circular. We are also working with pairing our cities with sister cities, mainly in Europe, and that's just to increase the connections and the relationships with some of those leaders that we have in Europe. So if one of our communities wants to focus on, say, the sharing platform, then it makes sense to connect them with a community in Europe that has already advanced quite a bit on that topic and has a lot of lessons learned and really some advice on how to progress that initiative. And then we are looking at implementation now. So with certain communities, really how to get those initiatives that were identified in the roadmap, how do we actually get them boots kind of on the ground and get some of those initiatives started out in the cities. Just I wanted to note too, with our workshop, the RCA, of course, is very much a waste reduction, recycling, reuse kind of focused group. But the workshops at the city level, we wanted to make sure this was not just a waste workshop. We realized the circular economy is much more than about waste. Obviously, we think it's a big component of it, and that's kind of where our expertise lies. But we did want a number of departments at those workshops. So you can just see here at the different communities, the different departments that we had, some things like policy development, economic development, agriculture. That's more for like Lethbridge is very agricultural focused. So we wanted to make sure that those people were at the table. Procurement, parks, infrastructure, innovation. So just to acknowledge that we did have a number of different experts at the table when we did discuss circular economy at the municipal level there. So as a result, we did develop tailor-made roadmaps for each of our communities. And those roadmaps identify the unique elements for each of our participating communities. They also have examples of current circular economy initiatives that are already going on in our municipalities. I know circular economy can be almost overwhelming and it's like, where do we even start? But if we do take a good look at our communities in Alberta here, there are some really cool examples of circular economy already. So we wanted to highlight that progress that we've already made to date. So each of the communities has those examples in their roadmap. We did want to make sure too that these roadmaps aligned with the community's strategic goals, just to make sure that everything is on the right track and really focusing on overall sustainability. We had some focus areas of where our communities should probably be kind of focusing on in the next kind of couple of years for certain initiatives to try to implement. as well as then we had some challenges and barriers identified for each of our communities. We know this won't be easy going forward, so just trying to overcome some of those specific barriers. And then of course, future actions. So just a little bit of a layout of how we think they should proceed based on those initiatives that were identified in the workshop, and how to kind of keep carrying on the inspiration that came from the workshops and implementing some of these topics. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the little bit more detail in the roadmaps, and this is where I'll go into Calgary, focus a little bit more on Calgary, since that's probably most of you on the call today. But the top green rectangles there just show some of the similar concepts that were identified in each of the workshops in our different communities. So I'll just pick out a few that we recognize as being very important and for all of our communities in terms of progressing circular economy. So communication, a lot about networking, whether it's industry or even more at the consumer or resident level, specifically youth too there. And I think today, for instance, is a great example of that, even just the connections that we're making today, sharing some ideas and just some of the concepts. So that was a really important piece that showed up in the majority of the workshops. Other things like design, policy, of course, being a big one there. So we need to make sure that we have the right policies in place so that we can enable and foster that change to become more circular, whether it's for businesses or industry, and even residents. Repair is a kind of a neat one. And then sharing economy too was a big one that resulted in it from all of the workshops at the community level. So I'll just talk a little bit more about some of that sharing economy. So specifically in Calgary, the idea of actually asset management, specifically at the city level. So different areas that perhaps maybe aren't utilized as much as they could be. So we have lots of open open space in Calgary, or vacant space, I should probably say. So trying to offer some of those spaces up to certain organizations or groups that maybe don't have a space to become innovative or maybe promote their businesses, that type of thing. So offering that space there as more of like a communal gathering spot. It's there. We just need to figure out the best way and most efficient way to actually utilize it and share that space. I also want to bring in Banff because I know Banff isn't Calgary, but they're very much connected, as most of you have probably made the trip out to the mountains at some point in the last year. So in terms of sharing at their level, they've actually come up with the idea of a community hub. So it's like a central location that offers services to their community members that might include repair cafes, food redistribution, tool sharing libraries, just general places to gather and talk about innovative ideas, offer business solutions, think concepts like that. So, and especially in Banff, because it's very much a tourist center. So I think that it was made apparent that the community really needs their own place to be able to kind of come together and escape the hustle and bustle and have an option to kind of share their own skills of whether it's repairing or sharing tools, that type of thing. So that was a really cool idea that came out of their workshop. Repair. So similar to with the community aspect, though, repairing is really critical to having those materials kept at their highest use. So and bringing people together. So for something like a repair cafe, having people share their skills of like how to sew a button on a shirt or something, rather than just tossing a shirt and buying a new one. Repair is critical, and it's often an easy target to really kind of bring the community together to share some of those skills and support businesses too that offer those repairs. You see like even like whether it's boot repairs, textile repairs, things like that. We used to do that all the time. way back when, right? That was just the norm. We couldn't just go buy a new thing, but now it's almost too easy, and we need to bring that repair focus back to the community. So transportation, this was an interesting one that came out of the Calgary and Banff sessions, because a lot of times, again, going back to that personal vehicle use, the drive that people do back and forth from Calgary, Canmore to Banff. So is there an option for a shared transportation method there, so that like a regional transportation system that kind of avoids some of that personal vehicle use? This we realize is much more higher level and perhaps more of a goal, aspirational goal, but just looking at certain options there to bring in the transportation part of circular economy. If you're interested in our project, I highly encourage you to check out our project website. It has some great resources, examples of best practices, a little bit of a summary of the project, as well as all of the roadmaps that we did develop for our communities are available online too, so you can access them there. And it's just under our resources tab there on the top. It's Circular Cities. It has its own webpage there. I just want to kind of finish with some examples, some of those cool examples that I spoke to that we determined in the workshop, as well as through some research with our communities. So really, what are our municipalities already doing in terms of circular economy? So Banff has a really great food rescue program where grocery stores and restaurants are committed to donating edible food for those who need it. They also have a really neat initiative called Bare Minimum. It's a local not-for-profit organization that offers programs like a cup library. So if you go to a cafe in Banff and you don't want to use a disposable mug, you can actually pick up a reusable cup there. And then once you're done with it, you can drop it off at another cafe or other participating locations within the community. They also do things like clothing swaps and offer stations that where you can kind of get bulk items like soap refills and things like that. The Calgary Fire Department. So this is a really great example in Calgary. So their fire department, when they do the training to put the fires out, they use a lot of water, obviously, but they actually collect that water then, and then they recirculate it, and they will reuse it then for the next training session. So they're not pulling out new water every time to do training. They're actually reusing that water. The city also has a sustainable building policy, and that's applies to all city-owned and financed projects. So everything from the planning, designing, constructing, managing, renovation, operating, and demolishing is all carried out in a sustainable manner. And they do strive to update that policy in response to green building industry changes. And I'm sure you'll hear much more about that type of thing on Friday again. Some other examples we had in Lethbridge. I had mentioned that they are very much an agricultural focused community. So they have a really neat initiative with certain restaurants, grocery stores that are actually sending their inedible food waste to farms to be fed then to animals. So that's just again avoiding disposal of any food and getting rid of that food waste. The fruit rescue program. So many communities actually have a certain type of similar type of program. It's just they'll often be people will be linked on whether it's Facebook or some other platform, and you'll see all the different trees in the community that have fruit on them, so people can actually go out and harvest that fruit. They will have sessions or workshops on canning or making pies, things like that, so that fruit is actually, as much of it as possible, is collected and utilized to feed people. Strathcona County has a really cool hodgepodge lodge. I just like saying the name. It's so you can see it there in the bottom right hand corner. It's basically a shed that is a part of their eco center there, where people can drop off unwanted items, slightly used items, and then people can go and pick through stuff and find what they might need. So just kind of a bit of a almost salvaging example there. And they also have a big focus on textiles, and in order to reduce the amount of textiles that are sent to landfills. So they have a partnership with Goodwill and Thrift Store, and a program like Souls for Souls, which diverts shoes. And I actually recently did a presentation for the city of Yellowknife, and they worked for Waste Reduction Week. And they had some super cool examples that I had to include in this presentation because it's very much along circular economy. And so they actually had a Facebook page called Salvagers Unite that just started during the pandemic, I think because a lot more people were at home, they had some time. And they wanted to try to fix things. So this is a neat page where it's basically the only rules are that all items must be either given away for free or traded. And it serves as a community connector and generates ideas for finding unusual used items. So this stove in the middle here, which was actually probably illegally dumped somewhere, but someone had asked, well, I need the burner part of the stove, and where do you think I'd be able to find a replacement for those? And then someone took a picture of this, they saw this and said, hey, I found this stove. I think it has elements on it, so why don't you go ahead and check that out? So it's a cool way to bring the community together, also encourage repairing, reusing of items. I just thought it was a really cool platform. And then they have a similar type of thing with Yellowknife upcycling. So just some kind of neat initiatives that showcase creative ways to upcycle common objects, like the paper towel one here on the bottom. It just is quite amazing. So it was an old lamp that wasn't functioning anymore, so they actually turned the lamp into a paper towel holder. So just some cool photos and design ideas, and again, really about bringing the community together and encouraging the innovation for reusing and repairing items.
Hey, Lindsay, there's actually a company here called Reworks, where the whole premise of that store is that they've reinvented different items that would, generally be waste items, such as, old license plates or skateboards that are made into coasters, things like that. And I know that the Zero Waste or Plastic Free YYC also has Facebook site where you can post your items that you no longer need that somebody else might be able to use.
Those are great local examples. And yeah, Plastic Free YYC has done some great initiatives. And I didn't realize that they had an option to post items on their website there. But just encouraging options like that for people. And then it's just about promoting awareness too of those options for people. And that's actually it for me. If anyone, I guess I'll pass it back to Erin now. She's the one in charge. So then I think we'll do some questions after.
Yeah, hopefully I won't blip out again. But I thought maybe it would be good to pause at this moment and do another one of our surveys just to get a feel for who's in the room. And you'll notice Lori probably scrambling to try and pull up the survey. We have a couple of these surveys where we want to try to interact a little bit with you guys to feel you out as an audience. And, I can't iterate this enough that you're all part of moving circular economy as a concept forward. So it'd be nice to know what is your affiliation, and you can select more than one if you belong to more than one of these.
And I think
if I've missed your category, feel free. Well, I don't know how you'd fit it in. We didn't have another.
Type it in the chat. Just type, if there's another category, type it in the chat. And if you have questions, if you either turn on your video so that we know that you might be wanting to ask a question, or use your reaction button on the bottom to wave your hand. That way we'll know if people have questions.
Yeah, so a lot of nonprofit folks, but a little bit of everybody. The only one I don't Oh yeah, I see even service provider, everybody, every box is ticked. So that's amazing. We have a really good cross section of people here today. So appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for this session. Let's go to our next slide. So yeah, we have put down some materials here if you want to learn more about circular cities. These are generally from the Circular Economy Club, but there's some good links, and I think Lindsay touched on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They're a great resource, and as she was saying, kind of the experts on circular economy. And you know, there's a lot of stuff happening in certain cities in Europe, in the EU that are they're really pushing things to the next level. And yeah, it was great to hear a little bit more about the circular cities thing. It definitely gave me some food for thought. And Lindsay, I was curious because you talked a little bit about food waste too, and you know, things that don't necessarily come to us right away, but even the fact that peels or rinds or pits, I don't know if that came up at all in the discussion when you guys were having your circular cities talk, like how do we reinvent, say, an avocado pit into a new product?
Well, that's a cool example. But honestly, for the workshops that we hosted for the circular cities, it was much higher level than that. It didn't dive deep into specific examples like an avocado pit. But so it more just talked about food waste and potential ways to either avoid food waste, or even just that the community wants to commit to tackling food waste as an initiative moving forward.
Yeah, I know I have attended other sessions where they were talking about using different food waste in order to create items like, I think everyone here has probably heard of pineapple leather, where they use actual pineapple to create a leather, like a fruit leather out of it. But yeah, a lot of research and development probably still has to go into those types of concepts, but definitely the sky's the limit on how you can reinvent things that you would normally just think are just things to throw in the garbage. But how do we take it to the next level and figure out how we can divert everything? I know I'm a bit of a hoarder, where I have started saving plastic containers so I can take them to the refilleries. But then what do you do when you run out of, you know, you have too many of these plastic bottles, and how do you actually just cut down on even buying them in the first place? It's definitely a hard concept to go to.
And I think, Erin, too, just cities, I think their role, or they often identify their role as enabling and fostering the space and the innovation for whether it's businesses or individuals to come up with some of these creative and innovative solutions. So it's not that the city decides what should happen to that avocado pit or the pineapple leather, but it's about providing and encouraging the space for entrepreneurs to develop those pineapple leather solutions. So it's very much about fostering that change and innovation.
I have a question related to that, actually. So for example, there's a tool library in Bridgeland, and I'd like to see more of that in the community, the shared economy. And our municipalities, and maybe the City of Calgary in particular, that's where I'm located, is the cities making it easy for communities to create those types of spaces? Because I know they had some troubles with expansion, and they were also dealing with their community. So I don't know how much was the challenges were with the community or how much was with the city, but do you have any comments on that?
So I can't comment specifically on that example, but you're correct in terms of the city. The city very much wants to make it easy for options like that to come up, but there may actually be some, either a bylaw, whether it's at for the community center or even just the community, a bylaw that might indirectly be prohibiting that a function like that, or even the expansion as you referred to. So the city, again, their role is to identify some of those barriers, like, oh, this bylaw is actually prohibiting tool libraries in Bridgeland. Okay, so we need to modify that bylaw then to actually at least allow or permit that type of resource, or potentially even encourage that type of thing. So perhaps even this is probably not a great example, but like a bylaw that somehow encourages tool libraries, but at least permits and allows that type of thing to happen. Yeah.
And is that what you were referring to in some senses when you were saying that cities are more nimble? You said they're more nimble, but more nimble compared to what?
So more nimble than compared to like the provincial and federal government levels. Yeah. So, and the ability like for the city to actually make some of those bylaw changes or develop new policies. It's a lot, cities are a lot more flexible in that regard. And that's key for advancing a circular economy, because even though we may not realize it, and your tool library is a good example there are some barriers that are currently present that are actually impacting some of that, the innovation and ability to have some of those business models in play. So it's just being able to firstly identify those and then make the required changes so that we can actually allow and encourage those types of systems.
Yeah, I guess we've seen in a few of the Canadian cities that, you know, ban on single-use plastics, so not being able to offer those as an option at all. I don't know that Calgary is close to going that route or not. We might be a little bit farther away. I also know from when I lived in Europe for a spell, this is 20 years ago or 25 years ago, that, you know, there was a limit on how much waste you could put in the landfill bag, like the black bag, and the rest had to be recycled. So you were limited as a household. And I think we're trying to do that somewhat as well at the City of Calgary, although we're not really placing penalties on people having extra bags of trash. So you know, all these things tend to encourage different type of behavior, but then it's hard when I guess it's seen as a punitive measure that limits the way we like to live. And I guess we have to get away from that. We're owed these certain conveniences and really shift to, you know, what we actually need.
I have a question that might be related to that. This is someone that's posting a question. Alberta has heavily invested in oil and gas without an exit plan divestment strategy. How do we leverage the strength of plastics in our system until we phase out that industry? The only thing I've heard of recently is upcycling certain plastic waste to fuels, which is limited and expensive, but keeps some things out of landfills.
So I think I'll just make a quick comment here about, because Alberta does, we manufacture a lot of plastic in our province. And I think realistically, we're still going to have plastic for a very long time. And plastic has some amazing attributes to it. Like there's a reason it was invented. But we manufacture a lot of virgin plastic in the province, but perhaps we can start to shift that and make that transition to making plastic from recycled content. We are the experts when it comes to plastic, I guess I would say. So perhaps we can then transition that to be more just plastic from recycled content. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I probably already said more than I actually know. I think our executive director may actually be on the line too. So I would invite her to participate in any of the discussions that she feels that she has some contributions to make too.
Again, I think we need to recognize that, you know, we're on this journey where we're trying to diversify and transition to different ways of doing things, but it isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen even in, you know, the next 10 years. It's probably going to take a whole generation to even make a lot of progress. So I think we have to be patient with ourselves and understand that, you know, we rely on certain processes and definitely we want to change, but yeah, it's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll keep going to next steps. So this is just, oh, and I'm sorry, this slide didn't turn out that great. I was trying to provide ways in which you could all connect to us. I did put a few in the chat. So if you do want to learn more about the Circular Economy Club, like the head one, which is based out of Europe, then you can definitely go to their website. The Calgary chapter email is Circular Economy Club YYC@gmail.com. Our social media channels, we have one on Facebook now. We also have a LinkedIn profile. We want to continue these conversations. We want to really hear from you on what you have to offer. This might be a good time to bring up another one of our polls around, maybe let's start with the one on optimism. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being high, how optimistic are you that we can improve or get more circular, I guess? Well, that's great. That's great. I think, yeah, we can definitely make great strides together. And yeah, only a couple people voted 2, or one person voted 2. So really, yeah, that's great to hear that people are being very optimistic towards the future. There was a comment here that I just see, some cities need pressure to move into the circular economy. Many policymakers only see this interest as fringe and not mainstream. They need to see the demand for a circular economy is widespread, and they need to listen. And I think the way that they will listen is bottom dollar through money. So if there are ways to monetize going circular, ways to create a business out of repairing items, or doing research on new products for, you know, big brands, you know, that's the way to do it. So let's find those opportunities and let's try to capitalize on them and build capacity in our own province and our own cities around this. Next slide. So this is really just a thank you, but I also wanted to end with another poll around what action you are prepared to take. After having heard this session today and lots of great information that you probably want to take home and digest and think about, but what action are you prepared to take today after leaving to move circular economy forward in your own lives?
And your answer to that, just add that into the chat. And maybe while people are answering the chat to that question, what's the action they're going to take from today, I'll just also launch another poll around hope.
So what gives you most hope on this topic? Is it science and research, technology, innovation, government taking action, private sector engagement, youth movements, changing consumer behavior? And maybe it's a combination of things. Yeah, changing consumer behavior, I agree. That's a pretty big one for sure. Innovation, great. Science and research. So yeah, in the session on Friday, we'll be hearing from a number of different people with their various lenses on construction materials and how to become more circular. So we'll include a PhD student from the University of Calgary, also a professor who's working in Edmonton with circular home builds, or home builds that incorporate circular economy concept. We'll also be hearing from a representative from the City of Calgary Environmental Safety Management Group on how they are diverting materials from landfill. And then lastly, we'll hear from Dan Zembel. He's with Alberta Waste and Recycling on, the challenges and the opportunities with trying to recycle construction materials and what are the new products that come out of those. So we really encourage you to please come to our session on Friday. There's still lots of spots left if you wanted to take a listen, and that session will be from 10:30 a.m. to noon on Friday. There's also a question here from Dave at Ruckify on, I would love to learn how can a company like Ruckify get more involved in the Circular Economy Club. So I do know that there are ways to become a circular economy ambassador through the main website, but I wonder, Lindsay, at a local level, how would you advise Dave?
So from a business point of view, I think it's very much about kind of learning from other businesses and getting in touch from those that have tried to tackle circular economy and looking at their business models. So I know with the RCA, we have a fair amount of business members. And oh, okay, sorry, I'm just looking at the Laurie's video there. Yeah, so I really think collaborating with other businesses and just kind of learning from what's already happened. And I would encourage you to check out the RCA. We have a strong membership, and we have lots of different committees. So like we have a Circular Cities committee that has so we had a bunch of members help out with our Circular Cities project and be involved in things like researching and review. We have a number of other different project teams as well. So yeah, just really all about the collaboration and getting to know other examples out there. But yeah, I think that's all I have to really say about that.
And Circular Economy Club of Calgary, like we would love to become a bit of a hub for people that are trying to push this forward. You know, also Rainforest Alberta has some tech groups that are working on very similar things or related into Circular Economy Club. You know, there's a lot of research development type stuff that's happening that we should try to leverage and really spread the word about. So we're hoping to have, I apologize for the
Civic Tech YYC as well.
Yeah, Tech YYC. You know, there's a lot of individual little groups doing their little piece of contributing to circularity in our economy, and it's just about connecting the pieces, to be honest. Like we have Leftovers YYC, who's doing a lot of food diversion, trying to get food from restaurants that aren't using it to people that need it. You know, yeah, Leftovers YYC, Civic Tech YYC, Rainforest Alberta. It's just all about us all connecting and hearing what each other is doing and figuring out how to best leverage the different things that are happening in the city and move it forward in some sort of a coordinated fashion. And maybe it doesn't have to be super coordinated. Maybe it can just be all grassroots the way it has been too. But we'd love to find a way to take it to the next level. And, you know, the Circular Cities project that Lindsay worked on, you know, created a roadmap for a lot of different cities, but I'm not sure to what extent some of those roadmaps will be able to be implemented. And so that's where, as a citizen, we should be advocating in the various communities that we live in. So, you know, in Calgary, we should be advocating with our decision makers at either government level or even with different associations that could influence doing things in a different way, and just really speak up that we believe that this is the way to go and advocate for it.
Yeah, Erin, I think that's great. And in Calgary, actually, we were fortunate enough to have Councillor Demong attend our workshop with the city. But that was our only councillor with the municipalities that we engaged. So I think really, yeah, as a resident, you can really be asking your councillor some of these questions and advocating for circular economy and making it a discussion point for our elected officials.
And small steps can be, you know, things in our own household, telling our friends about what they can do to limit their waste or get rid of the word waste from their vocabulary, things that they can do to, you know, even when we think about COVID and the way that COVID has kind of forced us to reevaluate what we need and where we need to get it from. I know people sometimes default to Amazon, but you know, that might not be the best solution either. Yeah, I see Laurie with her thumbs down. But it's actually, I think, forced a lot of us to consider, oh, do I really need to buy new clothes? Well, I have lots of clothes in my closet, so maybe I don't need to, or maybe I can repair that, you know, hole in my jeans that that will still, you know, be able to extend the life of it for a little bit longer. Or, you know, can I go to a refillery instead of having to buy a new product at a store? There's so many different things that we can think about. And even with our electronics, I think that's really a lost opportunity where we're not thinking about that enough. So having more thoughts and more ideas on how we can create that, that would be great. Any other questions from the floor? If not, we can sort of wind down. And
what are people doing? Like, what are you doing? I'm curious. Everybody's shy.
I could talk about what Ruckify is doing.
Yes, I'm curious to hear about Ruckify. I need to be educated, please.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So Ruckify is a rent anything marketplace. So think Airbnb, but for items. So we help people rent out items that they already own to other members of the community. So instead of going out and buying something brand new, you're only going to use once or twice. We encourage you to go to Ruckify and rent it. So if you've got, you know, stuff collecting dust sitting around, why not put it on Ruckify, and you're gonna, you know, be able to make some money and also help someone save some money, as opposed to you know, going out and buying something brand new you're only going to use once or twice. So you know, we're really you know, conscious about the environmental impact that this is going to have, and we also actually plant a tree for every registration, rental, and review on Ruckify as well. So we're really trying to get more involved in the community. It started in Ottawa, where Calgary was our first expansion city. So I'm always on the lookout to how we can get more involved in the community, how we can help educate and really show people the power of the, you know, sharing and circular economy.
No, that's
sounds like a future presentation might be in order.
I was going to say, Dave, I think I actually may want to touch base with you after. There may be some collaboration there with the RCA. I'm curious to know more about that and see if we can maybe even promote that a little bit.
100%, I would love to.
Okay.
Anybody else? Well, that was a really good presentation. I really learned a lot. I really enjoyed it. I got to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while, even though it was just their name on a black screen.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, thank you so much to everyone who participated, and we're happy to continue the conversation, you know, over social media or by email. Feel free to reach out to us, and we can always have some offline conversations as well. And stay tuned for events. You know, after our event this Friday, we'll also be looking at doing additional events, and they might have to be virtual for a while, but we hope we can eventually meet in person too. So please stay tuned, and we thank you very much for coming, and I will close the session then. Thank you.